I'm Sophia, a 26-year-old M.Phil student. To most people, I am just another hard-working girl, quiet and focused, someone who keeps her head down and avoids unnecessary distractions. My world was simple. Books, research papers, long library hours, and the constant pressure to prove myself in academics. Somewhere deep down, I always felt like I was meant to achieve something greater, and for that reason, I never allowed myself to get tangled in unnecessary complications. But then there was her. My supervisor. My madam. She was a woman in her late 30s, though she carried herself with such elegance that no one could ever really guess her exact age. Always dressed neatly, with an aura of command, she walked through the department hallways as if the whole building adjusted itself around her presence. She was respected by all, admired even, and at the same time a little feared. Her tone in class was sharp, her expectations high, and her words often left students trembling. And yet, there was a strange softness about her too, one that peeked through her expressions when she smiled unexpectedly, or when her eyes lingered on someone just a moment longer than they should. I had heard the rumors, of course. Whispers in the common room, passing comments in the library, half-suppressed giggles in the cafeteria. Some said she had a tendency of getting too close to her female students. Some even hinted that she had turned them into something more than just researchers or assistants. I never paid attention. For me, she was my guide, my mentor, my supervisor, someone who stood between me and the successful completion of my degree. Nothing more, nothing less. At least that's what I thought in the beginning. From the very start, there was something about the way she treated me that felt different. I convinced myself it was because I was sincere, because I was good at my work, because she found me dependable. But little things began to stand out. She would often ask me to stay back after meetings when others were dismissed. Instead of strictly discussing my progress, she would talk to me about my family, about where I grew up, even about my favorite books. Her voice, usually so formal and commanding, would soften when she spoke to me. Sometimes, when I was presenting my data, she would lean closer than necessary to look at my notes, her shoulder brushing mine lightly. Other times, when I asked a question, she would pause for a few seconds longer, her eyes holding mine in a way that made me feel seen, truly seen. There was a smile she reserved for me. It wasn't the polite one she wore during seminars, nor the sarcastic smirk she flashed when a student gave a wrong answer. No, this one was private, warm, almost secretive, like it belonged only to me. First, I tried to brush it all away. After all, I was shy by nature. I wasn't used to such focused attention. I would get flustered easily, hiding behind my notebooks or pretending to check my phone whenever her gaze lingered too long. But the truth was, every time she gave me that special attention, a part of me couldn't help but wonder why. Why me, out of all her students? Was it just because I worked hard? Or was it something else? Something I was too hesitant to even name. The more I tried to ignore it, the more obvious it became. She wasn't just supervising my research, she was observing me, studying me. And though I told myself to focus only on my academic goals, a small part of me began to feel the weight of her closeness, like a gentle pull I couldn't resist. That was the beginning, the first signs of something I never saw coming. It didn't take long before Madam's way of supervising me began to change. At first, our meetings were always held in the seminar room, surrounded by charts, notes, and a few other students working quietly in the background. But then one day, she said it very casually. "Sophia, why don't you bring your work to my private research room? It's quieter there. We can concentrate better." I hesitated for a moment. There was nothing unusual in her request. It made sense academically. But the way her eyes lingered on me as she said it, almost expectantly, made me feel as though there was more behind her words. Still, I nodded. She was my supervisor. It wasn't as if I had much of a choice. The first time I entered her private room, I noticed how different it felt from the rest of the department. The air was warmer, softer, almost scented with her presence. A large desk stood against the window, papers neatly stacked, and books lined the shelves in perfect order. But what struck me most was the atmosphere. It was less formal, more intimate, like a space where walls between teacher and student could easily dissolve. She welcomed me with tea. Not the standard canteen tea we usually had during long research sessions, but a delicate cup she had brewed herself. "You work so hard," she said softly, handing me the cup. "You deserve something better." I smiled shyly, thanking her, and tried to bury myself in the notes I had brought. But her gestures of closeness didn't stop there. She began sitting closer than before, pulling her chair beside mine instead of across the desk. Whenever I pointed out something in my research, her hand would sometimes brush against mine as she leaned in to look at the papers. And though I told myself it was accidental, the way she didn't pull back immediately made me wonder if it truly was. At first, I tried to focus solely on my work, but Madam had a way of steering our conversations. She would ask me about my childhood, my family, my dreams beyond academics. And slowly, she began sharing things about herself. "I don't trust people easily," she confessed one evening, her eyes fixed on the rim of her teacup rather than on me. "I've been let down too many times. Colleagues, friends, even people I once cared deeply for. That's why I keep to myself." There was a pause, heavy and fragile. I didn't know what to say, so I nodded gently, sensing that she wanted me to listen more than reply. "You see me as strong, Sophia," she continued after a moment, "but strength often hides loneliness. And sometimes even I just want someone to understand me." Her words touched something inside me. I had always seen her as unshakable, someone untouchable, someone who could never be vulnerable. And yet here she was, revealing cracks in the armor she wore so flawlessly in front of others. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to reach out, to tell her she wasn't alone. Another part of me pulled back, reminding myself of who she was. My supervisor, not someone I could allow myself to get entangled with. But the more time I spent in that private room, the more blurred those boundaries became. She started asking me to stay longer after our sessions, insisting I didn't rush home. She'd make me tea, sometimes offer snacks, and often linger beside me, her shoulder brushing mine as we worked. I would feel her eyes on me when I was writing, and when I looked up, she wouldn't look away. One evening, as I was flipping through some reference papers, she placed her hand gently over mine to stop me. The touch was warm, deliberate. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she whispered. "Take a moment. Breathe." My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to pull my hand back, but something inside me froze. The way she looked at me, tender, almost aching, made it impossible to move. I told myself she was just being caring, just showing concern for her student. But deep down, I knew there was something else in her eyes, something unspoken yet undeniable. After that day, I could no longer ignore the tension between us. Every gesture, every smile, every brush of her hand seemed loaded with a meaning I didn't dare name. I respected her deeply, but I also felt a hidden pull I couldn't fully resist. Conflicted was the only word that described me then, torn between duty and curiosity, between discomfort and a strange desire to know what she truly wanted from me. And slowly, I began to sense the truth. She didn't just want to guide my research. She wanted me, closer, nearer, in ways I wasn't ready to admit yet. It was after one of our long evenings in the research room when Madame leaned back in her chair, studying me with a thoughtful expression. I had been poring over my notes for hours, my head aching from numbers and theories, when she spoke casually, as though it was the most natural suggestion in the world. "Sophia, why don't you come to my home tomorrow? We'll get more done there without all these interruptions." Her tone was calm, professional even, but something in her eyes told me it was more than just about work. I hesitated, fumbling with my pen. Going to her home felt different. The department was one thing, a professional environment, but stepping into her personal space seemed to blur the lines even further. Still, what choice did I really have? She held my research in her hands, the progress of my degree, the future I had worked so hard for. Refusing wasn't an option. So, the next day, I found myself standing at the door of her house. She lived in a quiet lane near the college, her home tucked away behind flowering hedges and tall iron gates. I rang the bell with trembling fingers, and when she opened the door, she greeted me not with the strictness of a supervisor but with a warmth I had never seen before. "Welcome, Sophia," she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. The moment I entered, I was struck by how different this space felt compared to the stiff walls of the department. Her home was warm and inviting, filled with books stacked neatly on shelves, soft lamps glowing in the corners, and the faint scent of lavender candles. There were delicate touches everywhere: embroidered cushions, framed art on the walls, a vase of fresh flowers on the table. It was a feminine, private world, one that seemed to reflect sides of her no one in the college ever saw. "Make yourself comfortable," she said, gesturing to the sofa as she placed a tray of tea on the table. "This is your home too, Sophia. Don't feel shy." I sat down carefully, trying to steady myself. She poured tea for me, her hands graceful, her every movement deliberate. I sipped slowly, my eyes wandering around the room, until I felt her gaze on me. When I looked back, she smiled, her expression soft, almost tender. "You look tired," she said, setting her cup aside. Then, before I could reply, she leaned closer and brushed a loose strand of hair away from my face. Her fingers lingered longer than necessary, the touch light but enough to send a shiver through me. "You're beautiful, Sophia," she whispered. My heart skipped a beat. No one had ever said those words to me in that way, with such certainty, such intimacy. I wanted to look away, to break the moment, but her eyes held me still. I stammered something, an awkward laugh escaping me, but she didn't withdraw. Instead, she reached for my hand across the sofa, her fingers curling around mine. At first, I thought she would let go quickly, like one does with a casual gesture. But she didn't. She held it firmly, her thumb brushing against the back of my hand in small, soothing circles. The room felt suddenly quieter, the air thicker. Her eyes searched mine, deep and unblinking, as though she was trying to read all the thoughts I was too afraid to say aloud. I should have pulled my hand back. I should have reminded myself that this was not just any woman, but my supervisor. Yet in that moment I couldn't move. I sat frozen, my breath shallow, my pulse quickening under her touch. Her hand was warm, grounding, and strangely comforting. It felt less like possession and more like a silent plea, a longing she was too careful to put into words. "You don't have to be so formal with me," she said gently. "Here we're not in the department. You're not just my student. You're someone I want to know beyond your research." Her words sank into me, leaving me speechless. 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind. Confusion, guilt, curiosity, a strange flutter of emotions I couldn't name. But beneath it all, I felt the pull of something undeniable. I looked at her, at the softness in her face, at the vulnerability behind her confident exterior. She wasn't the strict, commanding figure I had always known. Here in her home, she was simply a woman, lonely, searching, reaching out to me in a way no one ever had. My cheeks burned, and I knew I must have looked shy, even flustered. But I didn't resist. I let her hold my hand, let the silence between us stretch, let the weight of her gaze wrap around me like a gentle embrace. That evening we didn't talk much about research. Instead we talked about life, about dreams, about small things that had nothing to do with academics. She laughed softly at my stories, her hand never straying far from mine. And though a part of me wanted to run from the tension building between us, another part, deep, hidden, unspoken, didn't want the night to end. Something had shifted. Felt it. She felt it. And though neither of us said the words aloud, we both knew that we had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The days that followed my first visit to her home blurred into one another. I found myself spending more and more time in her private space, sometimes at the college, sometimes at her house. What started as simple research work soon became hours of quiet conversation, soft laughter, and silences that spoke louder than words. One evening I walked into her home again, carrying my bag full of notes. She was waiting for me at the door, dressed not in her usual crisp formal clothes but in something softer, a long cardigan over a simple blouse. She looked different, more relaxed, more human. As soon as I stepped inside, she took the bag from my shoulder without asking. "You always carry too much," she murmured. "Let me." I smiled awkwardly, unsure what to do with my suddenly empty hands. She placed the bag aside, then gently slipped the coat from my shoulders as though it was the most natural thing in the world. The tenderness of the gesture startled me. It wasn't what a supervisor would do for her student. It was something more, something closer. She led me to the sofa, and for a while we talked about small things. My project, her day, trivial matters. But I could feel it in the air. A heaviness, a tension pressing closer with each passing second. Finally, she grew quiet, her eyes fixed on me in a way that made my heart beat faster. "Sophia," she said at last, her voice lower than usual, almost trembling. "I need to tell you something." I looked at her, trying to appear calm though my palms were sweating. She took a deep breath. "I don't just see you as my student. I want more." Her words hung in the air, sinking into me like stones dropped into water. My heart thudded loudly in my chest. I opened my mouth to reply, but no words came out. Shock, confusion, disbelief, they all tangled inside me. Seeing my silence, she leaned forward slowly, almost cautiously, as if giving me time to stop her. But I didn't move. I just sat there, frozen, as she closed the distance between us and pressed her lips softly against my forehead. The kiss was so gentle, yet it carried a weight I couldn't describe. It felt like unspoken pain, like longing held back for years, like a silent plea for connection. My eyes fluttered shut without my permission, and for a moment, I simply let myself feel it. When she pulled back, her eyes were glossy, as though she had just revealed a truth that cost her everything. "I've wanted to say this for so long," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But I didn't want to scare you." I still couldn't speak. My chest rose and fell rapidly, my mind caught between the reality of who she was and the undeniable tenderness of her touch. She reached for me again, brushing her hand against my cheek. "You don't have to say anything, Sophia," she said softly. "Just let me show you what I feel." Before I could react, she leaned in and kissed my cheek. The warmth of her lips lingered, slow and deliberate. Then she kissed the other cheek, her breath brushing my skin. I felt my body tremble, not with fear, but with something dangerously close to surrender. Her lips found my forehead again, then the corner of my mouth. Each kiss unhurried, filled with longing, like she hadn't kissed anyone in years and was savoring every second. I sat still, lost in the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Confusion, hesitation, but also an unexpected warmth that melted the walls I had built around myself. Finally, her lips hovered over mine, giving me a moment, waiting. Her eyes searched mine, silently asking for permission. And though I never spoke the words, I didn't turn away. She kissed me. Softly, gently at first, a brush of lips that carried more emotion than any words ever could. Then again a little longer, her hand cradling the side of my face. It wasn't forceful, it wasn't rushed. It was careful, almost reverent, as though she feared I might break. I closed my eyes, letting myself feel the warmth, the tenderness, the ache in her kiss. My body tensed, then slowly relaxed as I allowed myself to lean into her. For the first time I kissed her back. Hesitant, clumsy, but real. The world around us seemed to vanish. There was only her. The softness of her lips, the faint scent of lavender clinging to her skin, the gentle way her fingers stroked my hair. Each kiss was unhurried, drawn out, filled with emotions she had buried for far too long. She whispered between kisses, her voice trembling. "You don't know how long I've waited for this. How empty I've been." I couldn't respond with words. My heart was too full, too confused, too overwhelmed. But I didn't push her away. Instead, I let the warmth of her kiss seep into me, softening the resistance I thought I had. In her arms, I didn't feel like a student or a subordinate. I felt like someone cherished, someone wanted in the purest, deepest way. And though a part of me still questioned what I was doing, another part surrendered to the undeniable truth of that moment. I wanted to stay there, in her closeness, in her care. Her kiss was not the claim of authority. It was the confession of a woman who had been starved of love and was finally daring to ask for it. And somewhere in the middle of that kiss, I realized I was no longer just her student. I was the answer to her longing. The room felt unusually quiet that night, as though even the air around us was waiting for what was about to happen. After the confession and the gentle first kiss, I thought maybe Madame would stop there. But she didn't. She had opened her heart, and she wanted me to see every corner of it. She led me gently toward the sofa, her hand warm around mine, trembling slightly as if afraid I might pull away. We sat together, and she turned toward me, brushing my hair back like she had done earlier that evening. Her eyes searched mine as if asking for silent permission. And before I could think, her lips touched mine again. This time it wasn't just a fleeting moment. It lingered, soft, deep, almost desperate, like she had been holding this longing inside for years. I froze for a second, my heart racing, but then I felt her other hand covering mine. Her thumb stroking my knuckles with such care that I melted into the kiss. It wasn't vulgar, it wasn't rushed. It was tender, like every breath carried a piece of her unspoken story. When she finally pulled back, her forehead rested against mine. "Sophia," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I'll take care of all your work. I'll handle everything. Just stay close to me." I couldn't reply. Words felt too heavy, too small for what was happening. Instead, I let her hold me. She wrapped her arms around me tightly, almost like she was afraid I might disappear if she loosened her grip. Then she kissed my cheek, my temple, my forehead, and finally my lips again. Each kiss a confession, each touch a promise. She stood up then, still holding my hand, and guided me toward her bed. It wasn't a commanding gesture. It was soft, hesitant, as if she was asking me to share her world for just one night. I followed silently, my heart confused, my mind battling between duty and the strange warmth rising inside me. We sat on the edge of the bed first, holding hands like two teenagers afraid to let go. She leaned in again, kissing me slower this time, her lips brushing mine as if memorizing their shape. She whispered things between kisses. "I've been so lonely. I just need someone who truly sees me. Stay with me, please." Her vulnerability broke me in ways I hadn't expected. I saw her not as my professor or supervisor, but as a woman who had carried loneliness for too long. When her eyes welled up, I instinctively reached out and wiped her tears. That's when she kissed me again, harder this time, with a kind of relief, as if my gesture had given her permission to release years of bottled emotions. We lay back on the bed, still kissing, still holding on to each other. Every time I hesitated, she slowed down, stroked my hair and whispered, "It's okay, I'm here." She even pulled the blanket over me, making sure I was warm, then tucked herself closer to me. At one point, when I got teary-eyed myself, she kissed my tears away, telling me softly, "You don't have to be afraid. You're safe with me." That night became a tapestry of quiet moments. Her hand stroking my hair, my hand resting on her chest, feeling her heartbeat, soft whispers exchanged between lingering kisses. I surprised myself when I leaned forward and kissed her on my own. It was shy, uncertain, but it made her eyes light up in a way I had never seen before. She cupped my face gently, kissed me back and held me even tighter. The night stretched endlessly. We kissed on the sofa, on the bed, sometimes breaking into soft laughter, sometimes falling into deep silence. She told me stories about her life, how she had trusted the wrong people, how her heart had been broken, how she had always longed for someone who would not judge her. With every word, I felt her walls crumble. And somehow, without realizing it, I had begun lowering mine too. By the time exhaustion pulled at our eyes, we were lying in each other's arms, wrapped under the blanket. Her arm was around me, my head resting against her chest. I could hear her heartbeat, steady, calming, real. She kissed my forehead one last time before sleep, whispering, "Don't leave me, Sophia." And that's how the night ended. Not with noise or chaos, but with the quietest, purest intimacy I had ever known. I fell asleep in her embrace, and for the first time in a long while, she too drifted off with a smile on her lips, no longer lonely. When I opened my eyes the next morning, it took me a few seconds to remember where I was. The soft scent of lavender, the warmth of a blanket tucked around me, the faint light streaming through the curtains. It all felt strange, unfamiliar yet comforting. And then I turned my head and saw her. Madam was lying beside me, her head propped up on her hand, simply watching me. There was no trace of her usual strictness, no professor-like authority in her gaze. Her eyes looked softer than I had ever seen them, filled with something unspoken, something gentle. "Good morning, Sophia," she whispered, her voice tender, almost hesitant. I felt my face warm. For a moment, I wanted to hide under the blanket. But before I could, she reached out, took my hand, and pressed a soft kiss against my fingers. The gesture was so delicate, so caring, that it sent a shiver through me. "You look beautiful when you sleep," she added quietly, as if confessing a secret she had been holding inside. I didn't know how to respond. Words felt clumsy, unnecessary. I simply let her hold my hand, her thumb stroking gently across my skin. The silence between us wasn't heavy. It was warm, like the silence you share with someone who makes you feel safe. Soon, she stood up and insisted on making breakfast. I offered to help, but she shook her head with a playful smile. "No, you stay. Let me take care of you for once." I watched her move around her small kitchen. There was something almost domestic about it. Her hair tied loosely, her sleeves rolled up, humming faintly to herself. It was a side of her I had never imagined seeing. She brought the tray to the table. 2 cups of tea, toasted bread, a simple omelette. Nothing fancy, but the way she served it made it feel like the most special meal I'd ever had. She slid the plate toward me, then leaned forward and brushed her lips against the back of my hand again before letting go. We ate together quietly. Every so often our eyes would meet and she would smile, a small, fragile smile, like she was still unsure if I would push her away. After breakfast, she leaned back, her expression turning serious but soft. "Sophia," she began, her voice almost trembling, "no more pressure for your work. I'll finish it myself. You don't have to do anything if you don't want to. I just want you close." Her words stunned me. For weeks, I had felt trapped between my academic dependency and her growing closeness. I had thought she wanted me because of her desire, because of a need for control. But in that moment, watching her eyes glisten as she spoke, I realized it wasn't just lust. It was something else, something deeper. She wasn't holding me hostage with my thesis anymore. She was freeing me, giving me the choice to walk away. And yet, instead of feeling relieved, I felt my heart ache. Because walking away suddenly didn't seem like what I wanted anymore. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had once been only my supervisor, who now sat across from me with vulnerability etched across her face. She was older, wiser, but also lonelier than anyone I had ever met. And she was offering me not just comfort, not just protection, but care. I should have felt conflicted, and I did. Part of me whispered that I should keep my distance, that I had come here for my work and nothing more. But another part of me, a stronger part, whispered back that maybe this connection was not something I could deny. When she reached across the table again, brushing her fingers over mine, I didn't pull back. Instead, I held her hand in return. Her eyes widened slightly, as though she hadn't expected me to respond. Then, slowly, a tear slipped down her cheek. I leaned forward without thinking, and kissed her hand the same way she had kissed mine earlier. She closed her eyes, her lips trembling with a smile, and whispered, "Thank you." That morning I realized something had shifted inside me. It wasn't just about needing her for my academic work anymore. It was about wanting her. For her kindness, her care, the way she looked at me as though I was more than just another student in her life. And though I didn't yet have all the answers, I knew one thing clearly. Something real had begun between us. Something I couldn't ignore. The days that followed unfolded like chapters of a story I never expected to live. Madam was no longer just my supervisor, no longer just the woman guiding my research. She had become something gentler, warmer, more present in my life. She treated me not as a student bound to deadlines and pressure, but as someone she truly cared for. Every time we met, she asked first about me, how I was feeling, if I had eaten, if I was resting well. The weight of research, which once felt suffocating, began to lighten. Tasks that had once drained me now felt easier. not because the work had changed, but because her presence turned stress into calm. In her office, our moments grew quietly intimate. Sometimes, while explaining a concept, she would let her hand rest over mine a little longer than necessary. Other times, when no one else was around, she would pull me into a soft embrace, her cheek brushing against my hair as though finding peace in that simple closeness. One afternoon, when the corridors were empty, she closed her office door. I looked at her questioningly, but before I could speak, she stepped closer and kissed me. It was unhurried, filled with warmth, the kind of kiss that made me forget the world outside existed at all. I leaned into it without hesitation, surprising myself at how natural it felt now. We began to share little rituals, tea breaks that turned into long conversations, evening walks back to the parking lot where her hand would secretly find mine, quiet moments in her home where we'd cuddle on the sofa, wrapped in a silence that spoke louder than words. It was strange, this new world we were building, but it didn't feel wrong. In her care, I found comfort I hadn't realized I was craving. And in my presence, she seemed to find the companionship she had been yearning for all along. Our relationship had grown beyond boundaries of teacher and student, beyond duty and dependence. It had blossomed into something tender, something fragile yet strong, something that felt a lot like love. When I look back now, it almost feels unreal, how I walked into this story thinking I had no choice. At first, I told myself I was only there because of my research, because I needed her guidance. But what I found in her presence was something I never expected: love wrapped in tenderness, care hidden behind years of loneliness. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, we stood together on the balcony of her home. The world felt quiet, as though time had slowed just for us. She turned to me, her fingers gently brushing mine before she leaned closer. Her lips met mine in a slow, lingering kiss, soft, deliberate, filled with all the emotions words could never capture. When she pulled back, her forehead resting against mine, she whispered, "Stay with me, Sophia. Not because you have to, but because you want to." My chest tightened at her words. She was giving me freedom again, reminding me that this wasn't about pressure or obligation. It was about choice, about love. And in that moment, I knew my truth. I wasn't staying because of my work anymore. I wasn't staying out of fear or hesitation. I was staying because she had shown me a kind of love that was patient, gentle, and real. As I wrapped my arms around her and kissed her again under the fading light, I whispered to myself, I came to her for my work, but I stayed for her love. And that was how our story began. Not with duty, but with devotion.